You're listening to episode number 44 of the Play Your Position podcast.
Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count. Here's your host, Mary Lou Kaser. Let's get started.
Kickoff, move the chains, and touchdowns. Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, where we take amazing conversations straight into the end zone. I'm your host, Mary Lou Kaser, and this is the podcast that features conversations with and about people who show up and play full out each and every day. They are the people you admire: entrepreneurs, writers, artists, musicians, parents, teachers, athletes, adventurers, and their stories give us a glimpse into what it means to be human. My goal for each episode is to introduce you to fascinating new people, new ideas, and inspire you to keep playing full out in your life's work in order to make a difference. As always, details about each episode can be found over on the show notes page at my website, playyourpositionpodcast.com. It is game day, and we've got a great show in store for you today because of my guest, Travis Steffen. Travis, are you ready for kickoff?
Let's do it.
Fantastic. A self-proclaimed paradoxical cross between an annoyingly alpha meathead and an uber nerd Mensa member, Travis Steffen is a former pro MMA fighter, former pro poker player, turned self-taught tech entrepreneur and growth hacker who has started and sold 6 companies in the past 6 years. He currently runs Upshare.co, one of the market leaders in viral marketing tools. Travis, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here because you are the first guest I've had the opportunity to speak with who's really inside this growth hacking, industry, and building companies and turning around and selling them, because 6 companies in 6 years, that's a lot. So we're just going to jump right in. Listeners know that it is game day. You are suited up and taking the field. Share with us what your current position is like for you on a typical game day. When you're out there playing, what are you doing?
It kind of differs every day, but for the most part, what I'll do is I captain the growth arm of our company, basically run projections and simulations on new traction channels, work with existing employees and contractors to execute on some of the traction channels that we're trying to unlock or test, and then learning more and more about the ones that are working really well for us. So what I typically do most of is I dissect our product and inject viral marketing mechanics into deep into the bones of the product. So what that means is I'll create ways to add value to our users in exchange for them inviting others back to us. So it's not like a horse trade. It's not a barter system. It's very deeply offering the core value that they want by inviting others. So for example, if you become a member of Skype, if you sign up for an account with Skype and you don't know anyone on Skype, you're not getting any value of the product. But the second you invite someone that you want to speak with, you unlock a bunch of the value. The second you unlock a second person, you unlock even more value, and so on and so forth. So, that's a type of viral marketing called inherent viral marketing. It's actually very rare outside of very specific tools. But there have been 12 different forms of viral marketing that we've mapped and that we're teaching our users about, and we're trying to create tools around to allow webmasters to bolt onto their sites and have their users recruit others back to them for free. Most sites aren't able to quote unquote go viral and achieve hyperbolic exponential growth like a Skype or WhatsApp or Facebook or Slack, but any site that injects viral marketing and gives it some time or effort can at the very least get a deep discount on their ad spend, because for every user that you pay to recruit, they recruit other users for you for free. So on a per user basis, you're actually spending a lot less. And that in and of itself can get you ahead of the competition. So basically what I do is help our product team engineer our tools in a better way to help grow the business rather than just satisfy our existing customers.
Okay, so let's take this. That was a really great close-up of the mechanics of your day. And for listeners who are sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, he is talking a language that I'm either just getting to learn or I have no idea what that means. The big bird's eye view about viral marketing and stuff. Could you share a little bit about, and this comes into my next question, is how did you get into this? I mean, you're a former MMA fighter. You played poker for a while. So what got you into being a viral marketing tool creator?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, my path has, like, it seems to be all over the place. I'm very much a meathead. I'm definitely a bro in that sense of the word. And I'm completely comfortable laughing at myself about how cliche I am at times. But as far as going from MMA fighter to, viral marketing specialist, the journey is actually all about progress. Like my fascination with the creation of something big and meaningful from the sum of daily small efforts is really the foundation of everything I do, from fitness to sports to business to entrepreneurship to tech, anything in between. I love working hard every day to do a few key things that eventually create something much bigger and more helpful to the world around me. And I would say that fitness or fighting or sports in general are one of the most primitive forms of that, because it really is, especially individual sports, when you're working hard yourself to acquire skills and just become more capable of executing them in comparison to your opponent. That's the most raw form of the visualization of progress that you can come up with. So there are people who fight for one reason, but for me, I actually really enjoyed training a lot more than competing, because of just being able to see the visual representation of the progress you're making every day. And that was why I did a lot of the things I did. It was why I loved online poker for the time where that was in existence in the US. And it's why I love running and building and scaling and selling tech companies.
That makes so much sense. And I really like how you use the physicality of the human body in terms of training, whether you're training to be an MMA fighter or you're training for your first 5K, that process is the same in terms of choices that you have to make on a daily basis, almost on a minute by minute basis, and cultivating that self-awareness and then channeling those decisions in the right direction is really a universal principle, as you said. So thank you for sharing that. Now, on this journey, Travis, who has been an instrumental coach or mentor for you? Because we all know we can't do it alone. Even if you're training in a solo sport, you still need the help of outside influences. So who has been someone in your current position right now that's helped you do what you do?
Yeah. Well, early on in my journey, I didn't really have any quote unquote mentors in entrepreneurship. I came from a really blue collar area, grew up in the middle of nowhere in Iowa, born and raised there, went to college there, played football. And when I got done playing football, I actually tore my Achilles tendon and could no longer play a couple of years in. Didn't really have a plan for what I wanted to do next. So just kind of got my master's degree and moved out to LA with a few friends of mine, one of which was working for my clothing company that I had started. Just started watching everything I could get my hands on entrepreneurship, and I was watching a DVD on repeat. I must have seen it 200 times. And there were these two people in the DVD. One of them I really, really resonated with from a really young age, when I was getting involved in boxing when I was 12 and MMA coming up. When I was 17, I switched over to MMA, and Dan Caldwell is the founder of Tap Out, and Tap Out's the Nike of MMA, and those guys were gods to fighters at the lower and mid levels when I was coming up, and they were just the quintessential underdog story, essentially. And it was it was fascinating to see that guy was just a couple connections away. And so I just cold called everyone on the DVD, and one of them gave me the time of day, and her name was Andrea Lake, and she was a successful entrepreneur, and I was running a couple companies that weren't doing much, but I was doing something, and I was demonstrating that I had, the drive to figure it out. So I basically reached out and I was like, look, you don't know me, but I would love to hop on the phone with you, maybe for 5 minutes. And I would promise you that I will make it worth your while for the next 50 years of your life. If you just kind of validate some of the things I'm doing. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for help. I'm just asking for your ear for a few minutes and just let me know if I'm on the right track. And she did, and we ended up having more continual calls, and now we're best friends. And she's also a business partner of mine in a venture that we're building. And eventually it got to the point where she asked me if I wanted to meet Dan. And I remember being so starstruck when I first met him, because he was somebody that I looked up to before I even knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And they were $1 billion company. And I was sitting in this guy's penthouse in the Palisades, looking over the water, having one of those moments like, it was almost like how you feel like you have an I made it moment before you actually did. Just like one of those things, like I visualized this from when I was living in this like basement apartment in the middle of winter in Iowa, where like we didn't really have good insulation and like we had to like duct tape our windows. And I'm like sitting here like thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my God, this is actually happening. And since then, he's been like a great friend and mentor and business partner as well. And we've learned a lot from each other. And it's so humbling when he comes to me and says that he really looks up to me in certain ways. I never expected that in a million years. A couple of years ago when that happened for the first time, it was like one of those moments where I'm like, okay, I can start taking myself a little bit more seriously. I think I'm a little bit more capable of doing bigger things than I thought I was. And it really sparked the next evolution in my own mind.
Wow. What an amazing journey, Travis. Honestly, I did not know that connection. And I just learned about Dan Caldwell from Andrea Lake, who I, got in touch with and is going to be the next episode that airs of the Player Position podcast. And that whole story during that time is really amazing from a hustle standpoint. And that's one of the things I extract from what you just said, is that you weren't afraid to really get out there and hustle. You picked up the phone, you called people out who you had no connection with, but you just went for it. And I just think that message cannot be emphasized enough, especially in today's world. No one's going to come knocking on your door and say, oh, I'm so glad I found you, despite the fact that we live in a time where the whole inbound marketing thing is really popular. And I'm not negating that. I'm saying that is very real. People do find you that way. What I am saying, though, is if you have a big vision, it really is up to you to get up out of your seat and get on the field and go for it. And by doing that, you will get people to notice you. You will get the right people to notice you. And look where you are today. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and don't misunderstand. I was terrified.
Of course.
I was absolutely terrified. But like the way that you have to frame it a lot of times is the things that scare you are the things that are most worth doing. Mm-hmm. They're those catalysts that can spark something in your brain that you wouldn't have been able to see or find anyway. So that if you can kind of reframe that to think to yourself, okay, I'm afraid of this, so I need to do it. Like I started taking an acting class a few months ago because I was terrified of acting. I loved public speaking, but for whatever reason, acting or like singing in front of people is just the most terrifying thing to me. So I figured I should probably do that.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. And how's that going for you?
It's oddly enough, it's been great. It's been a nice little evolution in some of my own. I don't know, like you don't ever really think that you have social fears or certain things like that, but oddly enough, it gets you more out of your shell than you otherwise would be. especially around the people that you're practicing around or exposing it to, who just see like a deeper side of you, even if you're terrible at it. And I mean, I definitely am in a lot of ways, but yeah, it's just been it's been an exercise in willpower, so to speak.
Yeah, and again, nothing wrong with that. You continue to challenge yourself so you can play a bigger game in what you're really good at. And I completely applaud anybody who's willing to step outside their comfort zone and face their fear head on instead of shrinking from it and saying, well, I'm comfortable, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's good enough. That phrase, good enough, is so dangerous, especially if you have a big vision. And speaking of getting out of your comfort zone, during every football game, Travis, as a former player yourself, you know that in order to get the ball down into your end zone where you really want to get it, there's a lot of things that can happen as you're moving the chains down the field. Tell us about a time when you have found yourself on the field and things aren't going according to game plan. Maybe you threw the ball and it got intercepted, or somebody came and got you from, on your blind side and took you down and you were sacked. How did you recover? First of all, what happened? And then how did you recover from that devastating situation?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm kind of a perennial bootstrapper, so I'm definitely no stranger to financial hardship. And I've probably gone broke as an entrepreneur about 4 different times. I've been below zero. And to be honest with you, the first time was terrifying. Every other time after that was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Because you really quickly learn after that first time, and many entrepreneurs that are coming up will ask more seasoned entrepreneurs, like, what if I go broke? I'm terrified of going broke because I have this, I have this money now, and what if I lose it? And you really quickly learn that you're smarter and resourceful and more resourceful than you give yourself credit for. And, money is actually easy to make. The lessons, though, that you learn by risking everything that you have for something you believe in are not easy lessons to acquire. So oftentimes the lessons that you learn as a result of going broke are worth every dime that you spent on them, if that makes sense. So,
totally.
That's happened to me a number of times. It actually happened to me a few months back, where we've been actually using the acquisition money for 2 of my last companies to grow and scale Upshare for the last, I believe, 19 months now, and funding a team of 5. And we got to product market fit in March and did a wave of optimization in April and May, and are converting traffic really well now. But yeah, we got relatively close to the red line for a little while, both myself and my co-founder, because we did not want to take a round of funding, at least not yet. And the reason is, we just really, really enjoy that environment where you are unable to throw money at problems. You have to really use your brain and learn how to solve problems that you're having or how to make things work on a budget. And when you're able to get in that mindset, as you start to earn money, you become a much more efficient organization. You become much more successful as a result, and you're going to be a lot more profitable because your employees are a lot more scrappy. Your environment is really, really efficient because it had to be early on, and it evolves into what it needs to be to service your customers well. But it's not outlandish. It's not ridiculous. It doesn't have to be the copycat effect to give all your employees free M&Ms or whatever the hell
cakes of beer in every corner.
You know what I mean? Like a lot of new founders will defer to their VCs and create an office that they think is like an arcade. And honestly, we've always been remote. We'll always be remote because we recognize that not all office environments are created equally for every one of our employees. Some prefer a different environment, and a lot of them are really antisocial, but they're really smart people and they work really well with the team. And if they want to go out and have a good time with their friends in whatever way they see fit, we support that. And as a result, we're able to be a lot more efficient and a lot more cost effective, and our overhead is a lot lower. So essentially, in those hard times, as long as you're going through those hard times because you believe in something and you made a choice that this is what you're going to do. You're not going to take a loan. You're not going to take an investment. You're going to put everything that you have into it. And if it's not enough, then you can make that decision, and you can go out and hustle hard, and you'll actually hustle harder because there's a sense of urgency involved. So what I would say to listeners who are experiencing a time like that is try to stop thinking based on fear, and let fear instead transform into fuel that you can use to take actions that have been like really well calculated. Give yourself some fuel to learn some things that you otherwise wouldn't have, or do some things that you otherwise may not have, that can help take you forward. Get on the phone, cold call people, do some things that you would have thought were beneath you when you were making more money, and talk to your customers one-on-one, and do things like that. Do things that don't scale. Actually, go across the street and ask your neighbor if they would buy your product. Little uncomfortable situations like that are really, really helpful for your evolution as an entrepreneur. I know Noah Kagan over at AppSumo and Sumo Me, which is actually loosely one of our competitors at Upshare. But actually a guy that I really, really respect, teaches a course. And one of the lessons in the course is, go to the local coffee shop and just ask for 10% off. And it's not something that you're supposed to get a yes to. It's more something that you're just supposed to do because it's uncomfortable. And being able to make that ask in a scenario where other people wouldn't, you'll often surprise yourself. So it's one of those scenarios that it just becomes a lot more comfortable after you go through it. So if you haven't gone broke as an entrepreneur, you're missing a massive part of your education. Mm-hmm. I would definitely recommend that if you're able, if you don't have kids, or you don't have a spouse that has a stable income or something like that. Situations are a lot different, but if you have the ability right now, if you're single or you're in a relationship and your spouse has a job and you're not living well above your means or something like that, I would recommend, taking a risk on yourself and investing a lot of your own personal capital and going broke. And it's counterintuitive to a lot of the conventional wisdom out there, which is preventative around that. But there are so many lessons that you can learn, that you will learn as a result of that, how to be a smarter, more calculated, more cost-effective founder without throwing money at problems and hiring inflated firms and that sort of thing, and just figuring out how to be that jack of all trades when you need to be and how to be a specialist when you have to be is going to be incredibly beneficial for your evolution.
Oh my gosh, Travis, you just basically opened up your playbook and said, this is how you can be successful. And I love those lessons, several of them that I'm taking away. One is, don't be afraid of going broke. That's a huge message, because we live in a time, and that's going to lead me into my next question in a second, but we live in a time when in our face, more than at any other point in history, are all these end results of success, right? We see it on TV. We see it on the internet. We don't see that scrapping behind the scenes as much, even on shows like Shark Tank and The Profit that are about people going through the process of growing their companies or starting their companies. We don't see, it's so edited, right? And it's only in the day-to-day experience of wondering, how am I going to put gas in my tank so I can drive over to the print shop to pick up the order that I've hawked my last pair of shoes or whatever to go buy so I can distribute materials. Whatever it may look like. And that counterintuitive point that you brought up, I resonate with. And I think more and more people are starting to look at, what's the opposite that I need to be doing in order to achieve what I want, instead of following conventional wisdom. And for us who are sports fans, the players that I think we collectively just revere are the ones who can think on their feet, that aren't just so locked into doing it a certain way and refusing to really play or to play a bigger game if the coach or the organization doesn't just coddle to them. That's a big problem right now in professional sports. The commentators were just talking about that yesterday during the Cleveland and Golden State game, that when these players are given so much, like beyond, and many of them come from poverty. Many of them do not know the experience of having a lot of money, what that means. And they get into a lot of trouble because they went from nothing to everything. And that's too big of a leap. And that's why so many of them end up broke. And the smart ones are going to take that experience and do what you described and figure out, how can I get that back? I've had it once, I can get it again. And the ones that just are in the mentality or the mindset of the world owes me, I was so great and now I'm not, I'm just going to go boohoo in the corner. That's a shame. And it happens to too many people, but not the smart ones like you, not the smart ones like you. So my next question, Travis, has to do with you got into a lot of the shifts that are going on in the world. We have seen rapid change in a very short period of time. And we all know as human beings, we don't like fast change. Our minds can't process it. Could you speak to one major shift or change that you have either been challenged by or inspired by in the last 5 or 6 years?
I would say that the biggest challenge for me personally has been not necessarily one specific thing, but how rapidly things have advanced. And I say that based on when you're learning certain technical skill sets, by the time you've got a great understanding of them, a lot of the skills that you've just learned are now outdated. So it's almost impossible to become really efficient at a great number of technical skills. You really have to, especially on your product team, you have to have people who are specialized in specific important areas and are always trying to augment their education and trying to stay ahead of the curve at the forefront of, that advancement, because, new tools and new technology builds new tools and new technology faster. So, that's kind of like the foundation of the whole singularity type, theory that many technologists and futurists have. And my friends over at Singularity University are doing some really cool things. If you get a chance to speak with any of them, they can speak on this a lot more clearly than I can. But just how quickly things are evolving and advancing, and that sort of thing is fascinating. Things that took us months, 3-4 years ago, now take us minutes today, just because of the fact that other smart people were having the same problem and they recognized ways to solve it. So as cool and as disruptive as that is, every single thing that you do is bound by cause and effect. Mm-hmm. And, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And a lot of times, like, the people who knew really well how to do very specific things better than anyone on earth very, very quickly become obsolete in today's world because of the evolution of technology. So what we try to do is, one of the reasons that I've sold a company or two that I have is because I've seen that writing on the wall. I've seen that what we've just built that's really cool and really helpful. I remember the second company that I sold was a payment processing application. And it worked so perfectly and was so flawless. And as soon as we were ready to go to market, the market had changed from when we had developed the product. And it was before we really, it was before I really had embraced the whole lean start. It was pre-lean startup. So it wasn't really the rapid iterations, minimum viable product, build, measure, learn type of theory. It was like we built something from scratch that was going to change everything. And by the time we were ready to roll it out, things had already changed. And so it was challenging, and we were able to sell the assets to another company that was able to put them to use. But it's been a challenge, but it's also been really, really good for those people who should be entrepreneurs. Like, there are people who are in it for the wrong reasons, and those people quickly get weeded out, because just like in I guess a really good analogy is, if you're trying to become good at sports because you want to get girls, or you want to get in shape because of how you'll look, or if you want to become an entrepreneur because you want money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and you will fail, because things will get difficult, things will get tough, things will hurt. And that's when the people who aren't in it because they love it, that you have to pull them out of the gym, or you have to pull them out of the office because they're going to hurt themselves, because this is what they think about all day when they wake up, when they go to sleep, when they dream. It's what's on their mind. And if that's not you, you've got to find that because other people around you have. And to be honest with you, like, until you're able to find something that does that to you, it's a lot less likely that you'll reach your full potential in whatever you're choosing to do.
It's true. And in my mind, that is the absolute pinnacle of what it means to be human, is to find that passion, that your essence of being. And some people, it takes an entire lifetime. They never find it. And because they get caught up. Are you familiar with Napoleon Hill's work in Outwitting the Devil? Have you read that book or heard it?
I haven't read that book.
Think and Grow Rich, right? Well, in Outwitting the Devil, he takes what he talks about in Think and Grow Rich a little bit farther, and it's a really great book. If I'd recommend putting it on your reading list. And one of the major points is that in order to succeed in life, we've got to be able to leverage the matter of time along with the habit of drifting. He calls it the habit of drifting. And people who drift and don't control that are never satisfied with life, because they're always, we call it shiny object syndrome now. It's a pervasive problem, but it is one of the universal laws that if you get into that drifting mode, hopping from lily pad to lily pad, that's all you're going to get good at, is hopping from lily pad to lily pad. And one day wake up and say, why don't I have anything? Well, it's because you've been hopping around. You haven't ever stopped long enough to, even if you have to move quickly, you do have to slow down long enough to get good at something for a little while to have a benefit. And that's definitely a really interesting thing. So Travis, we are coming to the end of our conversation today. And one of the best parts of any football game is when your team scores a touchdown. So I think it is time that we do just that. So you are in the red zone and there are less than 30 seconds left on the clock. Your team is down by 4 points and it is third down, and now or never is up to you. Tell us a story about a time when you overcame this seemingly impossible obstacle and ran the ball into the end zone for a touchdown that won the game for you.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. I was in grad school. I had just recently started my first company, but wasn't really in that headspace to take it super seriously because I was still a 21-year-old kid and I was in party mode in college. And I had just turned pro as an MMA fighter, and I had just run a triathlon where everything had gone wrong. My goggles broke in the middle of the lake we were swimming in. Both tires of my bike went flat. It was just a nightmare. And I got done with it, and my girlfriend broke up with me over the phone, and it was just horrible. And it was just a bad, bad day. And I was livid, telling one of my buddies who I was staying with, because the triathlon was in his hometown. And he's like, look, you're covered in sweat right now because you're so angry at the day so far. So why don't you like go change clothes, go to your car and get some stuff and come back up. We'll go get some dinner. We'll have a few beers and you'll be fine. Okay, cool. So I go down, grab a shirt. I'm walking back through this parking garage in the middle of the day on a Sunday. And a fine gentleman walks up and asks me to help him get something from his car. Okay, sure. And ends up cornering me in a parking stall and tells me that he wants my wallet and my keys. And I'm like not sure if he's serious, but it becomes very evident very quickly that he is. In that moment, well, first of all, like most people, everyone, not most people, should just go ahead and be safe and give that person their wallet and their keys and call the cops and do that routine. But in that moment on that day, it was just the wrong day. And like I saw red, and I had been training with the UNI wrestling team for a few months, and I was so excited to try out some of these newfound skills. So I took my keys out and tossed them behind the guy and just hit the most showcase WWE double leg up, down onto the cement with like all my weight, and felt this pinch in my upper thigh, and looked down, and there's a 5-inch blade sticking out of my thigh, and I'm staring at it for a second, and I jump back and start yelling, and he takes off running because he no longer has a weapon, which I didn't see he had. And I by rights, I don't believe he meant to stab me. I believe it was in his hand and all my weight down. So in essence, I probably stabbed myself with his knife in his hand. And so he takes off running, and I call, oddly enough, my buddy who's upstairs, not the cops, not 911. I call my buddy, and I'm like, dude, I just got stabbed in your parking garage. And he didn't believe me. So he came down and freaks out, calls the ambulance, because there's a big slash across the front of my shirt. I've got a big gash on my chest, but there's this big knife sticking through my khaki shorts. And he calls 911. They send one police officer, not an ambulance, because they thought it was a prank call. And so the cop came, and he was like, "Oh man, you got stabbed." And so calls the ambulance.
Really?
And they odd, like, I didn't take it out because, like, I was in grad school for exercise physiology. I was thinking of being a professional strength coach at the time, and I already knew that this was in a bad spot. It was, I mean, if it wasn't puncturing my femoral artery, it was close.
Oh my gosh.
And so I wasn't gonna move it. I wasn't gonna mess around with it. And I got there, and the ER doctors did not want to remove the knife, and it was in my leg for 5 hours, and I was all morphined up, and having a great time on all the lovely opiates they were giving me, and they were doing X-rays, and one of the ER nurses, I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but the next day I really reflected on it more, and she was like, "Look, you need to see this X-ray. I mean, I know it might not mean anything to you, but this is like, you got really lucky. Like this blade is almost leaning up against your femoral artery, and we don't believe that's punctured it, so we're going to remove the knife." And they did, and they shoved in like a gallon jug of saline into my leg and cleaned it all out. And she was basically like, "You're really lucky, and you need to kind of examine your life and figure out like why you're still here, because this is crazy." And at the time, I had never really, never lived outside of Iowa before. I was still in party mode. I had started a company, but it was for the wrong reasons. I didn't really have a whole lot of purpose, but that day was like the biggest catalyst moment of my life, because I vowed in that moment, I was like, I'm here on borrowed time. I'm never going to waste another second of another day ever again. I'm going to make sure that there's always something that I'm reaching for, something that I'm working for, and I'm using every day as if it was, the most precious commodity that I have, because it is. And, I'm not going to be afraid to do things that I've always wanted to do, just didn't have the balls to execute. And since then, I've been obsessed with productivity and efficiency. I sold that clothing company that I had built, and 5 others since then. Now had moved from Iowa to Thailand to Los Angeles, which I love, living here right now on the beach. And it's been like, and I attribute all of that for the most part to that conversation with that person on that day in those circumstances. And most people don't have the ability to have that moment, that kind of like close to the edge, near death realization. But if you haven't had that, see if you can create it for, like, don't actually engineer the situation and go through it physically, but see if you can create it in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And try to create that shift that happened to me, because if it hadn't happened to me, I don't know where I would be today.
Mm-hmm.
Probably where most people are, floating through life and, thinking they want to start something, but don't quite have the guts to act or take a leap and quit their job or whatever it is, and take a risk on themselves. But I would push you to try. And if you fail, then you fail, and you'll learn some things. And it doesn't mean you'll go backward. It's actually going to catapult you far more forward than you've ever gone before.
That's right.
Because that's and I'm living proof of that. And I mean, 3 weeks after that happened, like, I got so lucky that the blade was vertical in my leg, and it didn't really puncture too many of my muscle fibers. And I was jogging 2 weeks later, and I was in Thailand fighting 3 weeks later. And I was there for 6 weeks, training 3 times a day, every day. And came home, got my master's, retired, moved to LA, and started getting serious about business. So that was what I needed when I needed it.
I love that story. Seriously, that is so powerful, what you just shared. And it just, again, emphasizes how one of my favorite lines is, the seed of advantage can only grow in the soil of adversity. And you didn't ask to be mugged. Life sometimes seems very random, but when you look back at it, you realize that was my pivotal moment. And yes, you scored a touchdown with the conversation with the nurse. It propelled you in a completely different direction. And some people might say, man, you lost that game. Actually, you ended up winning despite the injury, despite the fear, and the fact that day could not have gone worse, right? And up until that point, it could not have gone worse for you. And yet you were able to turn it around into something that has become very, very wonderful for you, Travis. You clearly are living the life that you want on your terms, and being a conscious citizen of the planet, which is not as common as we would hope. And your work and what you've shared with me today will inspire others to think about, what are they doing? Do they need to go out and figure out that touch point for their lives? Do they need to create an urgency in a way that they haven't before in order to really get what they say they want? So thank you so much for sharing that. And finally, how can listeners find you, Travis, and connect with you to learn more about your company, your past as a serial entrepreneur? Where do you hang out these days online?
You can hit me on Twitter at Travis Steffen, 2 F's, 2 E's. You can hit me up at upshare.co. I talk to every single one of our customers. I'm the guy on live chat. I'm the guy that does customer service. And we do that to gather qualitative data and be the best in the game at support. So you can hit me there and that sort of thing. So I would say those are the 2 main places where you can hit me up for sure. Fantastic.
And listeners, you know that you will find links to Travis's Twitter feed, as well as his company, on his show notes page at playyourpositionpodcast.com/Travis. You'll also find a recap of some of the amazing content that Travis shared with us today. And Travis, this has truly been an education for myself. I love stories. You told some amazing ones. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving me and the listeners of the Play Your Position podcast your time today. We just hope that each person will find within themselves that spark that will propel them to whatever's next. And your stories, I think, are going to be a great catalyst for that. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And before I forget, we have just opted to create what we hope will be the top viral marketing resource on earth at upshare.co/viral hero, basically a comic book educational adventure into viral marketing and what it is, how it works, the types of viral marketing, how you can implement it yourself, how other companies have, the math behind it, et cetera, in a more engaging educational way, in contrast to some of the more jargon-laden academic VC type blog posts that you might find that you have to decipher and suffer through. So head on over to upshare.co/viral hero and check out what we're doing.
Fabulous. And I'll put that link on your show notes page as well. But again, thank you for taking a creative approach to helping to explain something that for most people, in my experience, is so foreign and so not understandable that they don't even give it a chance. And yet there's value. There's so much value there. So awesome.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Hey team, are you tired of not being able to explain what you do clearly to people you meet at new networking and social events? Do you feel like a deer in the headlights when they ask you that question? Not to worry, I've got you covered. Go to playyourpositionpodcast.com/core for details about a super short and simple exercise to help you get your core message down pat. Impress your new connections and don't get tongue-tied ever again. Check out playyourpositionpodcast.com/core to find out more. See you there.
Thanks for listening to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count at MaryLouKaiser.com.